What's up, guys? We're here with Mike DeMarco, another episode of Dropping Knowledge. Mike, thanks for having me. We just got a sick workout in. I'm feeling it, but I'm ready to go. Just a quick intro from Mike. Mike has wrestled his whole life. I'll allow him to explain the details, but wrestled at Rutgers, became the strength coach, shifted into the corporate world, and a bunch of adventures you've been through. So I want you to explain a little more of your path and how you got here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Ange. And so I grew up the small guy my whole life. We were talking earlier while we were working out. Angela asked me when I started wrestling. I don't even know. When I started wrestling, my dad was the rec coach in my town before I was even born. So I was probably going to practice right away. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as he felt comfortable, I had shoes on and I was competing. And wrestling was really the core of my life, my entire life. And as the smallest guy forever, it was the only place where I really felt like I knew who I was. Like wrestling was really what gave me my identity. When I say small guy, when I was in 8th grade, the lightest weight class I think at that time was 77 pounds or 75 pounds, and I was 60 pounds. And the lightest weight class in high school at freshman year back at that in the 2000s was 103 pounds. I walked into freshman year of high school, I was 75 pounds. And my dad even had to sign a waiver with the athletic director to say it was okay for me to wrestle off because I was good enough to be the guy, but the coach just didn't feel like it was safe for me to wrestle. So, and that was kind of that has been the thread my whole life. Finally was of weight my junior year of high school. I hit 100 pounds for the first time. And I went from, if anyone knows wrestling, I went from not placing in the district tournament to winning districts, winning regions 2 times, and eventually having the opportunity to walk on at Rutgers. And then that thread follows me there as well. I mean, I walked onto Rutgers. The lightest weight in college was 125 pounds. I was 115 pounds walking on campus. And it really wasn't until sophomore, my second or third year at Rutgers, where I started to actually have hormones and become a man. Mm-hmm. And so it started to switch a little bit at that time. But for the first 18, 19 years of your life, for that to be the thing, it wasn't like a silent burden I was carrying, because it was my physical appearance that made me look different, but ultimately changed the way people interacted with me, which changed the way I perceived myself in the world. And so it had a huge impact on self-confidence, my identity. And I think that had a lot to do with why I really leaned into wrestling, because it was the only arena in life where, to some extent, the weight classes created a level playing field. Everywhere else in the world, everybody appeared to be 5, 6, 7 years older than me. When you're a junior in high school, you have hair under your armpits and you don't want to get changed in the locker room. Like, that's not cool, especially as a kid. And then you start going to prom and you're doing all these things and you look like you're 12. That really impacts the way you engage with the world and think about yourself. So
for sure,
on the wrestling front, that's really what I think has inspired most of the rest of the journey of my life, and made me really, really interested in exercise. Because in addition to wrestling, exercise, being undersized, exercise and strength training was the thing that filled that gap, the weight gap. I had to train in order to keep up with those heavier weight classes.
For sure. Did you ever feel intimidated when you were growing up, especially at the college level, when you got in there with the bigger guys? Did you feel a sort of intimidation, or were you ready to rock? Where was your mindset
at? The first answer that comes to my head is I had spent 18 years being intimidated. And so at that point I was used to it. Mm-hmm. It was almost like it was more comfortable for me to exist in the environments where I was the underdog, because I was always the underdog. And so going into college, I was legitimate D3 recruit. Like, I was getting a little bit of money to go wrestle at pretty decent Division III schools, and I had a last minute chance. I mean, I got recruited to go to Rutgers April of my senior year. Wow. after senior nationals. And so thinking back, maybe I didn't even realize it at the time, but I had an opportunity to wrestle D3 and be in an environment where I wasn't necessarily the underdog, or here's another opportunity where I can insert myself and be the underdog. And I chose that, and maybe had a little bit to do with, like, I was used to that and I craved that. And that I never failed being the underdog. Like, it always pulled me up into that next level. And so I'm sure there was some confidence stuff again, like that cycling through that internally. But I remember very quickly seeing it as like, no, you're used to not being like everybody else.
Yeah.
It as long as you stay consistent, like it always figures itself out for you.
And you thrive in that underdog position.
Yeah, sometimes to my demise, honestly. Almost, I see that a lot with clients too that I work with, right? Your particular client maybe has been so sick or so overweight or so unfit for so long that they feel more comfortable being in that state than...
They're like addicted to it, kind of.
Yeah, and they don't even realize it, right? So I think to my demise sometimes I feel comfortable or safe being the underdog or being behind or being in a situation where the cards are stacked against me, where it's like you didn't have to choose that option. Like you made it more difficult for yourself.
But like subconsciously you're attracting yourself to that position so you could, if that makes sense, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, we might get into this a little bit later, but before I shut the gym down, I went through 4 years of business coaching as a gym owner to make the gym a business. And in that process, they did marketing and all this stuff for systems for your gym, but there was a lot of one-to-one mentoring and coaching for me as a business owner. And I remember there was a long time where we were unpacking some of this stuff where I would almost gravitate towards making stuff harder for myself because I didn't know any different. It's like you didn't have to choose that option. You didn't have to make it harder on yourself. You didn't have to. You don't have to hoard everything and not delegate, like things like that, because that I didn't even realize that's what I was doing. But I guess circumstances wired me like that over time.
Yeah. So let's talk about the transition from wrestling into high school or wrestling in college to then becoming the strength coach at Rutgers. What was that transition like? How long was that time period? Your mental aspect, how'd you go from wrestling with these guys to now coaching, and just elaborate a little more on that part of your life?
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know, but so for those of you that know, I was a strength coach at Rutgers. You're like, yeah, Mike was there from 2018 to 2022. He was there when Anthony Ashnall and Nick Siriano won national titles. But the first time I was strength coach at Rutgers was actually in the spring of 2012. And my senior year of wrestling at Rutgers was 2012. I graduated May 2012, and I started strength coaching the team within weeks of the conference or the national tournament ending. Damn. So before we even get to later down the road, I'm 21 years old, and Goody knew what I was going to school for.
And that was his first year of coaching, right?
No, Goody. My first year at Rutgers was Goody's first year, 2007. So him and I had spent 5 years. I had spent 5 years with him building the program to this point. And for the first 5 years, because of the state of the wrestling program, we were just getting like the leftover hand-me-down football intern strength coach every year. And in my head, when I was going to school for exercise science, I always had this vision of being the guy for Rutgers wrestling because we never had a guy. And I went to school legitimately to be the Rutgers wrestling strength and conditioning coach all those years. And before I even fully graduated with my degree, I'm done wrestling, and Goody was like, you want to do this thing? And we did what we needed to do. But from the spring 2012 through spring 2013, I was technically a volunteer strength and conditioning coach for the wrestling team. And so imagine like you're 21 years old. You're now having to think about like, should I go to Queens tonight because I have to train these guys in the morning, like the same guys we're going to go out with. It was very weird. So I had to navigate that right out the gate. That was very interesting. But we figured it out. It was as professional as we could possibly be. And then my second stint at Rutgers was 5 years later. And so I was much more disconnected from the guys that were on the team. Most of the guys that were seniors at that point were maybe getting recruited when I was there the first time. But like we kind of knew each other, but it wasn't like the teammate relationships that we had first time around. So yeah, it was a very interesting immediate transition.
For sure. So now I want you to talk about the transition from being the strength coach at Rutgers to opening up your own gym.
It was ignorant. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
You don't know what you don't know. So I opened it out of pure ignorance, which was a good thing because I probably would have never opened it if I knew what I knew now or, went through the challenges that we did over time. And I knew so when I started strength coaching at Rutgers when I was 21 years old, amidst that time, I was also already in like the private strength and conditioning world. My dad was an entrepreneur. I think I have that. You know, I've talked to most entrepreneurs. They're like, yeah, you're either an entrepreneur or you're not. You have that spirit inside of you, and I think I always did. And so had some opportunities line up where I could start being an entrepreneur, and I jumped on it immediately. At 22 years old, you have way less risk than you do when you're at 35. And so I think that also helped at the time. I still had the support of my family to some extent, right? Still had health insurance with them and safety net, right? Like there's a lot of those factors that play into like, yeah, just go for it. If you fail within the first 3 years, you're still 24.
Exactly.
Right? So you
nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. So went for it. And it's as I'm answering this question, it's similar to being the undersized, underweight guy. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just spent 21 years of my life working my tail off in wrestling. And this was a great way to segment that over into being a professional. It's like, if you could figure it out at the Division I level and start for 4 years after you shouldn't have even been here, you could be a business owner. Like that's
for sure.
That's easy.
Exactly. You've worked with a lot of athletes and just people in general. When they come to you and they say, I'm burnt out, how do you walk them through that burnout?
It starts with questions because, everybody has their own experience or the own way that the world is working around them. And the way Angelo defines burnout for his world might be totally different from the way I define burnout for my world versus everybody else, right? And so the first thing I do is start to ask questions to gauge or gather all the data and variables and information that I need to understand what's going into your definition of burnout. Once we have all of that data collected, then it becomes a conversation around trying to figure out, there's really two things. One is, what is the root cause of the thing that's making you feel burnt out? And then number two is, what is, I like to call it your power plant. Like what has been the power plant to this point in time in your life that's helped you feel alive in life? So let's use an example of you're a creative to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have like a creative design, let's call it. And so if Angelo's starting to feel burnt out in life, his power plant, now that I know him, his power plant is doing things that are creatively expressing himself. That's DJing, that's doing this podcast, that's making content, right? And so I would bet that when you're going to feel burnt out in life at some point, those things that I just named are probably dialed down, not getting attention, not getting love. They haven't been watered. You haven't really been using those things. So like, we can't just identify what the root cause is. Like maybe you go into the corporate world and you get this high stress job, right? And you lean into that, and that might be the cause of your burnout. But we can't just live there and point the finger at work. We also have to identify, well, what's missing? Like, where'd your power plant go? And there's been many instances where creative comes to my mind because a lot of people, I believe everyone's born with some degree of creative expression. And
sure.
There's one story of this guy that comes to mind where he's an artist. He went to school for art. He went to college for art. And professionally, he's in a role now where he's doing digital artwork for a major corporation for marketing. And so he got a job in art, but it's not the form of art that is his power plant of art. His power plant of art is like realistic pencil design sketching. Mm-hmm. And so as he's coming to me, we're talking about burnout. The cause is work, right? And deadlines and all of this stuff. But there's also a lack of this other outlet that was driving his reason to even get a job in art. And after we were unpacking his story for some time, he hadn't picked up a pencil and sketched in over 5 years. And so in that conversation of burnout, we just slowly got him to open up his book and start sketching, and now he's drawing again, and we haven't talked about burnout in 2 years.
Wow. So I guess burnout might be necessary to an extent just to help you re-find your path, but it's important to keep the core values that you flow with, that make you at the top of mind, I guess, right? Like, I guess for me, DJ and all this stuff, keep it top of mind to prevent burnout, and that keeps you on track.
That's right.
Basically.
Yeah, so I love core values. I think every single human in the world has personal core values.
For sure.
The reason for core values is that those are your ingredients that make you really good, right? All of us can, like, there's 3 of us in the room right now. All 3 of us can make pizza with a different dough recipe, right? And the ingredients that go into that dough recipe make your dough unique and cook differently and taste differently. I love making dough. That's why I reference that. But everyone has, like, if there's a periodic table of core values, everybody has a different combination and magnitude and combo of those. And so you got to be in tune with what your personal core values are, number one. And then number two, as you're navigating burnout, I think of burnout the same as I think of overtraining. If you're training for a marathon, if you're training for high performance in anything, whether it's a marathon, wrestling, you name the sport, you have to flirt with that edge of burnout, or else you're not reaching your capacity.
That's a good point.
Or like your potential. And when you're doing a race, the point of the race is to test your limits or test your potential. And for me, burnout is just means that you stepped over the limit a little bit. So how do we bring you back down? Burnout isn't this death sentence. Overtraining isn't a death sentence. It just means, hey, there was your limit. Now you know where it is. Let's train. Like, the best training program helps you train right at that limit without overtraining for as long as you can.
I heard you say before on a previous podcast, I'm going to read it right off here, the boring, consistent things that go unrecognized are actually what get you recognized. And this is a huge point, I think, and I'm learning this too. For a long period of time, you just have to do the boring things that go unrecognized. Can you elaborate that on the days that you wake up and you may not want to work out or not stay disciplined? Where's your mindset at, and what can you tell the people to stay disciplined and continue to do the boring things for a long period of time?
Yeah, most things in life get boring at some point in time, right? Even the most exciting thing in the world that's new, it might be a new workout class or like a new gym, and like that feels good. At some point, it's going to get boring if you do it long enough. When I think about the mindset around that point of the boring, consistent you have to do the boring, consistent things regularly. I relate that in my head to having a founder's mindset if you're working on a team or with a company. So if I'm walking around the building that I work in and there's a paper towel on the floor, I'm picking up the paper towel, not because I want somebody to watch me pick up the paper towel, but because if I step over that paper towel and I don't pick it up, I have a greater probability that I'm going to do that in some other aspect of my life 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later. And so the same thing applies to the boring, consistent things. Even if I don't want to pick up that paper towel, or even if I don't want to do that workout, I'm making myself do that workout or pick up that paper towel, because in 5 minutes or 10 minutes later, I want to make sure that I at least put myself in the position to have a higher chance of doing that thing that's even harder than working out or picking up that paper towel.
Exactly, which leads me to think that habits must be important. What are some habits that you have, and how do you build habits?
Jeez, we could have a 3-hour podcast on this. Some habits that I have, it's obvious working out is one that's like, I don't have to work out. I want to work out. For me, it's one of the cornerstone habits that the rest of my life is built on. When I work out, I'm more likely to be disciplined when I log onto the computer, or I go to work, or I'm trying to be 100% present with my family and not on my phone or anything like that. Other people, that cornerstone habit isn't working out. It's something else. There's some other aspect, right? But for me, that cornerstone is working out. There's then some like secondary habits, I think, that are influenced by that or built off of there. Another one is being super organized with my calendar. When I'm not, everything feels kind of all over the place. I spent a long time not using a calendar, and about 6 years ago was taught a process that works really well for me. And using my calendar now isn't as much as like, I got to put everything, like going to practice or whatever. I use my calendar more as an executive function, let's call it, right? So it just gives me the train tracks to live my life on. So it tells me, hey, you don't have to say where you're working out or what you're doing for your workout, but this is your personal block right here. This is when you're going to work. this is when you're spending family time. So I don't need to put like, on this particular day at this time, I'm going to this restaurant. It's just like, no, like this 3-hour block of time every Wednesday, let's call it, is for this specific thing.
What are the best ways someone could build discipline and consistency?
Start with the thing that has the least resistance around it right now. So the most common things people talk to me about discipline and consistency with are food and exercise. So let's just talk about those two. In a scenario where we're talking to somebody and they're like, I'm not disciplined with either one of those. I've never met somebody where this hasn't worked. You pick one of those. Mm-hmm. Like which one, food or exercise, feels like the smaller mountain to climb right now. You let that individual choose the one, and then that's the one that becomes the cornerstone, at least in the beginning, for learning to be disciplined, versus trying to make everybody start with food or everybody start with exercise. I think we're all positioned to choose one or the other. Like one of those feels like a smaller mountain. So choose the smaller mountain, get to the top of that one, and that next higher mountain doesn't seem so high because you're now standing on top of that first mountain.
It's like building the muscle slowly, and then it just becomes easier and easier.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a doctor of psychology or anything, but you could see a lot. There's content out there, and there's a lot of stuff. I'm sure there's research out there that muscle is the same. It doesn't matter if you're applying it to exercise, food. I think the analogy I used earlier with the paper towel, that's why you pick up the paper towel. If you're not picking up the paper towel, it's harder for you to keep yourself disciplined to exercise, in my opinion.
For sure. What are some big misconceptions that most people have about health and fitness in general?
How genetic it is, I think, is one that comes to mind immediately. I often find that people like to lean on genetics as an out. Like, I just wasn't born with the ability to be disciplined with my food, or I wasn't born with the ability I don't like working out, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not like in my genes. Listen, there's genetics involved with your physiology, but everybody has the capacity to take responsibility for these aspects of their life. And it doesn't require, like, discipline doesn't require genetics. At least I don't think it does.
Another topic I want to talk about is just starting and not falling into paralysis analysis. What's some advice you could give to the viewers and me for just to get started and get the ball rolling?
I'll just take it on me. I'm secretly a perfectionist, right? And so you guys were asking me offline before, did you take any courses to learn how to do social media? And mm-hmm. The answer is yes. And so this time last year I took one, and I took another one in the spring. And my natural instinct when I do something like that is to take the course for 3 months and not do anything with the material until I've consumed the whole course and I feel like I know it really well. And what I've learned to this point in time in my life is that that's a trap, at least for myself. And my desire to learn the course all the way through is really my insecurity and my lack of confidence with the thing that I'm trying to learn. And so I'll use this story in my head that I have to learn the whole thing before I can start to implement it, because it gives me a way to have an out from you're just not confident, you're insecure. And this is the easier thing is to say, no, I'm just learning. Well, yeah, but you can learn and do at the same time. And so often, let's say somebody recommends this. I'll use a book called The Rockefeller Habits as an example. It's called Scaling Up is the name of the book. Really good, like, corporate infrastructure book with Rockefeller Habits and stuff. Somebody recommends this book to me, right? The first time I read it, when I still owned the gym, I thought I needed to read all the way through. And it's so dense and there's so many things inside of the book that if you've ever read that, like, it's easy to think that you need to read every concept and mm-hmm. install every tool. And in reality, all I did was waste 6 months, and I didn't really implement anything from the book. I hid behind the fact that I needed to learn it all the way through. Now, listen, there's some lanes of life where you need to learn certain things, but there's no reason why you can't just start doing something.
And learn through trial and error.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the best skills that I've adopted over time in 35 years of my life have come from situations where I've been forced to figure it out, not from situations where I went to school, I learned this thing in a sports psychology class, and I experimented with it on these people, and then I got a case study, and then I was like, all right, you're good 8 months later.
I often think too that studying and learning and listening to all these things makes you think that you're doing the thing, but in reality, you're not actually doing the thing. Chris Williamson says that all the time. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
That podcaster. He always says that. Like, you could read, you could do this, you could talk about it, but actually doing the thing is the only thing that's going to make progress.
I the last like 18 months, 24 months that I've had that realization finally. And I think I reposted something maybe 2 weeks ago or so. Someone, I don't even know who posted this, but it was a meme, and there was an image of like a mom in the kitchen with their kids, and the kids were like, "Mommy, why are we still poor?" And the image said something like, "Well, Daddy just spent 30 years listening to podcasts and reading books and did nothing with it." And it was like, that's so. Yeah. I was like, yes, I get that, right? And I was in that trap for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy to fall into that trap. I think many people are in that trap because even me, I'll listen to all these podcasts and it feels like you're making progress, but you've made no progress. You're just like mentally tricking yourself to think that.
I can't tell you, I could open my phone right now. I probably have over 1,000 notes in my iPhone from podcasts. And I'm like listening to podcasts and it gets your emotions going. Yeah. And I'm an emotional cat, right? So like if I'm listening to a podcast and it gets me going, I'm voice noting like 500 words in a note and I'm implementing all of it. I don't even remember the note because the next day I'm listening to another podcast and it's doing the same thing, right? And so all you have is this collection of random ideas that you never did anything with.
Exactly. But they help in moderation, but too much is no good, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I think if I can remember back to the times when I've listened to the most podcasts and read the most books, they're the times of life when I've felt the most uncertain, insecure, or not confident.
Exactly.
And so I'll lean into that stuff because it gives me a sense of security or feeling like you'll be okay, like you're surrounding yourself with knowledge.
But there's nothing that beats just taking action.
No, and honestly, like the next step below, nothing that beats taking action. There's nothing that beats surrounding yourself with human beings in real life who are paralleled or somewhat relative to the thing that you're trying to take action in, who are years, months ahead of where you are, and they could give you mirroring feedback on your position. There's nothing better than that.
No. Let's elaborate on that a little bit. How important is it to have the right environment and the people around you?
It's number one. And I say it's number one now being a dad because I'm watching how important it is as a dad to create that environment for our 3 kids. And my wife and I are ultimately responsible for the environment that our kids are modeling and growing up in. And that just has helped reinforce for me how important those environments have been for me my whole life. Like, let's talk about all the way back to the beginning when we started talking the Rutgers environment, right? If I had a choice to go Division III and not be a small fish in a big pond, or go Division I and not know if I'll even be on the team in a year, I chose the choice to insert myself in an environment that I trusted was going to elevate me to be able to hold my own, right? And it did. It did that for me over time. And not to say that going Division III, like that environment wouldn't have also sent me on a different path or whatever. Maybe I'd still be sitting right here, you know? But the Rutgers environment, that is a big, crucial period of time in my life where the environment that Goody and the rest of the staff created had a huge influence on like the trajectory of my life.
Did you have a lot of faith growing up and just in your whole process? Is that a big part of your life at all? Or?
Like religious faith or?
Yeah, just a belief that you're going to be good, like you're going to make it and stuff will work out.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You asked me about opening the business and I used the word ignorant. I can't tell you how many times a day I think I'm ignorant about, like to this day. Like we're sitting here in my nice garage and in my head, like, I don't think we're not going to have a pole barn that's 10 times the size of this with wrestling mats and a sauna and like this beautiful thing in my yard one day. Like there's just like, it's like, there's no other option. But then there's times where like you're riding a low emotionally, like you're ignorant, dude. Like you're not anywhere close to doing that. And so, but that's my brain's always operated like that. I've always been, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I think a lot of it does come down to belief. Like I I've never set out to accomplish something where my belief in my ability to be consistent and do the boring things failed me. Like it's always helped me survive and thrive, honestly, in those environments, no matter how hard it was, how long it took. I think the belief, once you lose the belief and the hope, it's over.
Yeah, there's not much. Yeah. Survive and thrive. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Through your whole process of life up until this moment, what have been some key valuable lessons that you've learned that you could share that would help someone's life?
One that comes to mind is, I think this kind of touches on what we're talking about with just taking action and not falling trapped to thinking you need more information. It's like right now we're doing this podcast. There's nothing more that I have to potentially offer in this exact moment than every experience and life lesson that I've had thus far. So I can't be any more prepared than I am right now to give you as much value as I possibly can. And that theme, I think, is a lesson that everybody could benefit from, that applies to every aspect of your life. Like if you are about to become a parent, you don't need any more books. Yeah, you could read books, right? But like reading another book isn't going to make you a better parent. Everything that you've experienced and that's been put in front of you in your life, the minute that baby enters the world for the first time, has prepared you for that moment. You don't need to feel insecure about not reading that additional book or taking that breathing class, or so long as you are proactively living a life where you're like waking up, being disciplined, and doing things that align with your core values, you're always going to be prepared for like the next thing that comes right in front of you.
That makes sense. Yeah, one thing leads to another, and you learn, and you keep going and taking action.
Yeah. Maybe that's now thinking like that helps with my belief. It's like because I believe in my process and my process has never failed me, I can have this radical belief because I'm always putting myself in a position to be ready for whatever the next thing is.
I want to talk more about like the health and fitness side of things. What are your biggest like pieces of advice you give to the average person that either wants to cut back on weight, gain some muscle? Do you give everyone the same idea, or do you have the belief that everyone's different and everything works differently for other people? If that
The
makes
second,
sense.
I think everything works differently for everybody. When I'm coaching individuals, you asked me a question earlier, I think it was the burnout question, and you said, well, what's the advice you give to somebody with burnout? My response is, the first thing I do is ask questions to collect data, and the same thing is true with health, fitness, wellness. I think everybody's different. My experience in the last 12 years has put me in a position to quickly recognize patterns and personas. I like to use the analogy, I did use this when I had coaches at the gym. I would always tell them, when you're coaching somebody, you're actually, like if I'm coaching Angelo, and as I'm asking him questions and he's giving me information and data, there's personas flying past my face. There's holograms of hundreds of other people that I'm trying to pattern recognition him to, that I've experienced. And so the more time I have coaching people, the more conversations I have, the more opportunities I have to quicker help connect Angelo with the same type of, let's call it an algorithm that a former person did that I might have worked with 8 years ago. Or some combination of two people, like one from 8 years ago, one from 4 years ago, they combine to be Angelo's algorithm. And like, bang, I'm able to start asking questions that clarify in my mind that my assumptions are on track. And then I can start to connect you with a path that is unique to you. Mm-hmm. I don't think, for some people, high intensity fitness, for some reason, works really well for them. For other people, not so much. And I've had two people this year. One lady has lost 60 pounds since April walking. A guy has lost 40 pounds since January walking. But then there's a couple people I work with who don't just walk. They're doing other types of exercise, right? And so I'm not walking. I'm not like walking next to them. I'm like not doing anything for them. I've just helped them figure out that that's the thing that's going to work best for them. Similar to the question you asked around like, what do you start with? For those two individuals that have lost weight, for them it's walking. Like they started with walking, and then the woman that's lost 60 pounds since April, it took us 6 months to introduce a nutritionist.
What about mindset? I know mindset's a huge part of all of this. Where do you guide people's minds when they first start? And what are some ways you train your mind specifically?
to answer your question on how do I coach people, my ability to coach people starts with how I coach myself or how I'm being coached by other people. Because I can't possibly coach you to the best that I possibly can if I'm not first taking care of myself. Because all I am is just a conduit, a vessel, a sounding board that helps you help yourself, right? Like I think early on in my coaching career, I'm sure this happens to most young coaches or whatnot. You think like being a coach means that the person you're coaching is dependent upon you, and it's like their success is your success kind of deal, and you design a lot of the stuff you do with that person on a coaching standpoint where they depend on you, and that's evolved tremendously in the 12 years that I've been coaching. Where if that's the case, then I actually didn't do my job. Like my number one responsibility is to coach you to independence and not need a coach. If I coach you so well that you don't need me, there's no better trophy for me than for that to be the outcome of our coaching relationship. And that starts with me coaching myself. So prior to me, like coaching that belief system inside of my own head, I used to coach people where they were dependent upon me or our gym or our system or whatever it might be. And so, so the ways I do that for myself, first and foremost, it's a ton of self-reflection, a big journaler. I've always been a journaler. I also, Angelo worked out with us before the podcast. We don't work out with music. I don't run with music. I rarely drive with music. Those are because I don't know, like those are the times in my day where I get to like live inside of my own head. I think a lot of people try to escape the thoughts that are inside of their own head. And I really try to like spend time with them because over time that to me has been an arena where it's positioned me to be successful with and for other people.
How's becoming a dad changed your life? I bet there's many things that it's changed, but you're now a dad of three kids. What's the biggest thing you've learned from being a dad, and how has your life changed holistically?
I tell soon-to-be dads all the time, and if you're listening and you're a dad, you might relate to this, but nobody prepared me for the minute your first child enters the world and there's like rocket fuel that's poured on top of your life. And if you thought you had urgency prior to that, you were like, wow, I've never been urgent. Like I actually just became urgent for the first time ever. For me, that's what happened when we had our first child. And actually it was in the buildup too. As that first baby was coming, and I know for the mom, they use a lot of the words like the mom starts nesting and like getting the house ready. For me, when I was owning the gym and I was still coaching at Rutgers at that time, I felt like intensity dial up for my urgency in every aspect of my life. And with that intensity, it wasn't hectic. It wasn't like I felt stressed or I was nearing burnout. I just like felt myself elevating to this new level of performance. And I started to have clarity on things where I'm like, you were worried about that, or you couldn't see a way through that, or you couldn't solve that problem. And all that stuff just started to like line up. And I was operating at this whole nother level. And so when we were pregnant with baby number 2, I was so excited because I was like, okay, so if I went from level 1 to level 2, like I'm going to level 3.
Exactly.
And then it happened. And then when we had our third child, like it happened again. And so I just have felt each of those children. I like to use this word. This mentor that I had, he used this word he calls it a forced constraint. And so each child has become a forced constraint where when you have your first baby, you almost have this instinct inside of you where you have to keep this human being alive. And so that ripples out and influences the rest of your life where you become hungrier to provide for your family, to clean your house, to like create the environment, all that stuff. And so every time we added a new child, it just multiplied the magnitude of the forced constraints that have made me more urgent with stuff.
Because you have to get it done. You have to make it happen. Forced constraint.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how people don't feel that.
Yeah.
I feel it every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I imagine not everybody feels that. To me, that's weird. That if you don't feel that, I don't understand that.
What you're saying is have kids.
I'm a big proponent. I think kids. I think first marriage and then kids. Just those are like massive, natural, simple ways to just like dial up and upgrade your life instantly. Yeah.
I like that forced constraint. I think anytime there's a deadline, or you probably in business too, when you have to make something happen, you're a different animal. You operate on a different mindset because there's not a doubt that you're going to make it happen, and you're forced to.
Yeah.
I think I need to. How could you implement forced constraints without having kids? Obviously, like just to, let's say, work harder, stay more consistent, disciplined. How can someone create a forced constraint to implement that?
Here's the easiest. Here's an easy, very, very common forced constraint that every person listening to this podcast has watched or done. Watch somebody do in their life, or they've done for themselves. They've been sedentary, they've been sitting around, and they sign up for a 5K. That's the easiest example that comes to mind. What does the 5K do? You start to do a couch to 5K program. You start to run. The first thing you do is you probably go out and you buy running shoes, right? And so then it just starts to create momentum in your life. And then when you start running and maybe you run that first 5K, then your eyes start to look at a 10K. And then you start to think about your diet. And then before you know it, some people are running marathons and ultra marathons. And they're like, I started because my brother said I couldn't finish the 5K. And now 3 years later, I run ultras. Like, well, who am I? And that, running is just an answer here. But if you think about from a business perspective, you guys were asking me before the podcast, how did you learn how to do social media? My forced constraint was paying a lot of money to somebody. That financial transaction forced me to have to do the thing that I thought about doing for so long. Like, I can't tell you how many years I spent that I really wanted to build a personal brand and build up my digital presence because I knew, you like that plug? because in my head, I'm so bought into the belief that digitally, that's my portfolio forever. Regardless of what industry I work in, if I open a pizzeria in 20 years from now, I still have my personal brand, my personal portfolio. It doesn't matter what industry I'm in. And so that idea has been in my head for 10 years. And I never did anything about it. Or sometimes I thought I was doing something about it. Or I've listened to so many podcasts and so many free YouTube videos and hid behind that. So then finally I had the money to, and I said, all right, if you really want to do it, pay for it. And it's not like that particular transaction provided me with some golden treasure chest of secrets to be a marketing guru. It just forced me to do the thing.
Exactly. And
just like the 5K does.
Yeah. To wrap things up, I want you to give a piece of advice, and you can take your time answering this. I want you to give a piece of advice you would tell your 20-year-old self or any other young person that wants to make it happen in life. What's something that you've learned that you would tell your younger self?
I would tell my 20-year-old self that you're never too young to start operating your life like you're 35. And I think for a long time, from 20 to 30, let's say from 20 to 32, when we had our first baby, I operated my life from this perspective of you're still 20, you're still 22, you're still 24, you're still 26, you're still 28, you're still 30. You don't need a financial advisor yet. You don't need to make a calendar yet. You don't need to do these things because when you have your first baby or you become 35, you're going to be forced to get a financial advisor. You're going to be forced to make a calendar. And in retrospect, now being 35, I was never too young to have a financial advisor. I was never too young to start having a calendar that was helping me have boundaries around my time so that I showed up more effectively for the person that was right in front of me, for you guys in this moment. Right? I was never too young for these things that at 20 years old felt like that's what old people do. And so I wish I started doing that stuff 10 years ago. And a lot of the insecurity, I think, a lot of it, me not doing that stuff 10 years ago was from insecurity of I only make 50 grand. Like, why do I need a financial advisor when I was 20 or whatever? It's because for the same reasons that now we were talking earlier around the same reasons why you pick up the paper towel is the same reasons why you get a financial advisor when you're making 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand. Because if you want to continue to move in the direction of this aspirational version of yourself, you need to start living your life with the card you're dealt right now in this moment, right? And so if I want to be a multimillionaire one day, I need to start living my life at 35 and doing habits and surrounding myself with structures in my life and people in my life who align with that version of myself. And I might not get there until for 10 more years. But with the piece of advice I just gave to my 20-year-old self, like if I apply that right now at 35, it will probably, like with a higher probability, put me in a position to reach that aspirational version of myself quicker.
Exactly.
Than if I just wait for like some big whale account to come through and I'm like, oh, you got a lot of money now. Like now start to live like you're a million. It's like, no, start to live and operate like a version of yourself who makes a lot of money right now.
Beautiful answer.
Cool.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again.
Awesome.
Appreciate you coming on. Thanks for having us.